Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM KFYO. Thank you very much for tuning in this morning. We go to the phones, visit with GOP political strategist Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Chad. I'm doing great. How about you this morning?
Doing great. Appreciate you joining us today. A lot really going on. We'll get into some Trump stuff here in a little bit. I do want to get your overall thoughts. There was a story that came out, I think it was this morning, maybe over the weekend, where Senator John Cornyn, I don't know if he's really pushing back on the DACA lawsuit from the state of Texas, but he kind of doesn't, it seems like he doesn't understand why the state is doing this lawsuit. Where do you think Cornyn is coming from on this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think that I'm a little surprised. It does appear like he could be confused on this because in this case, I think Cornyn's view is, at least what he said is, there's already a court case and it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and that court case is ultimately going to determine DACA's future. I'm not necessarily sure that that's the case. And, of course, he was a former state Supreme Court justice and a former attorney general, so he probably knows more than I do. But I think if you talk to the attorney general's office, I think from their standpoint, they believe that this lawsuit, challenges the constitutionality of the DACA program from its origination,
mm-hmm.
The current lawsuit that's going forward that challenges Trump's effort to end DACA, right? So you basically have one court case that's challenging Trump's authority that's gone several stages through the legal process. You don't really have anything that's really challenged Obama's authority to create DACA in the first place. And, of course, Texas was a big part of the lawsuit that challenged the related program, the so-called DAPA program for adults, which was struck down. So I think in this case, Paxton's believed from the very beginning that the program is unconstitutional. If you remember last fall, the state was part of a coalition, I think, of 12 other states that threatened to challenge DACA, and that lawsuit threat really, I think, forced the Trump administration to make a decision about DACA, and that's when President Trump announced that he was going to rescind it, because it was going to that lawsuit was going to put the Trump administration in a position where they were going to have to defend a program they believed was unconstitutional, and I think that was to a great extent the forcing mechanism for the Trump decision in the first place.
So Cornyn. Yeah, Cornyn maybe is confused on this and why the state's doing it, because he doesn't believe that immigration policies should just change back and forth with the administration, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think from his standpoint, my guess is, just reading the Dallas Morning News story that you're referencing, which did post this morning a couple hours ago, it sounds like Cornyn believes that this other lawsuit is likely to be ruled on first, and that it is ultimately going to determine the future of DACA.
So maybe he thinks the Texas's lawsuit is just not needed.
Yeah, I think that's basically right. I think that's probably his view. But again, I'm a little surprised. It's possible, that he sees things from a different position that maybe Paxton does. But I don't know. I mean, look, there's a lot of I think frustration at the federal level that particularly among members like Cornyn, who would like to see a bipartisan deal on DACA, that the Democrats haven't really been serious about this, that they've really preferred to have an issue than to have a solution. And I think that's pretty clear, with Trump taking the really incredible bold step to put a path to citizenship on the table just for the DACA kids,
mm-hmm.
And not have that reciprocated with anything meaningful from the Democrats. I just think there's a lot of frustration up there, and perhaps on this question, this is a legal strategy that Paxton employed that Cornyn's team was not involved in or read in on, and maybe there's just some confusion there between the two teams.
Yeah, interesting. Let's move on to President Trump. He did go to the NRA convention there in Dallas, gave a speech. How big was that for the president to attend that convention in Dallas?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think, that's his base. Obviously, the NRA was very supportive of President Trump in the campaign. I think they supported him at a higher level than any Republican presidential candidate that had ever run before that they'd supported. Obviously, the NRA has been under a tremendous amount of pressure and what I would call, I think, fairly ridiculous accusations. You have folks calling them a terrorist organization, just really over-the-top language. And in this case, I think, look, this was probably a bit risky going there at this time, given how much pressure the NRA is under. But clearly, I think if we know one thing about Donald Trump, it's that he cares a lot about his base, and he likes feeding his base. He likes keeping them satisfied. And in this case, he went there to talk about the Second Amendment, to talk about his agenda, talk about his accomplishments, but also to remind his base of the stakes of this midterm election, this upcoming midterm election. And I think, to some extent, his ability to turn out his voters is going to determine whether Republicans can hold the House or not. If they can turn out Trump voters without Trump on the ballot, that's going to make a big difference, because what we've seen in the special elections over the last year and a half is the Democrats have been able to turn out their voters without Trump on the ballot, sort of at levels approaching what you've seen in the presidential election cycle. So I don't know that there was a whole lot of new information necessarily from what Trump's speech was, but he was obviously very well received from the 70,000 or so delegates that attended that convention in Dallas. And it's a reminder that the Second Amendment and gun control is going to be a major issue in the midterm elections.
Yeah. Well, and playing on that, just going to the Democratic strategy, there have been a few stories that have come out since last week of Democratic strategists telling Democrats, stop focusing on impeachment talk, stop focusing maybe even on the gun issue, and focus on the economy and other issues. Are Democrats starting to realize that attacking the Second Amendment and constantly talking about Russia and a few of these candidates bringing up impeachment is not doing them any good at all?
I don't know that we've seen a Democratic strategy yet for the midterms. I think they're just kind of all over the place. I do agree that from a leadership standpoint, I think they've decided that talking about impeachment is not helpful, which is kind of interesting, because that's really the thing that motivates their base more than anything else.
Right, yeah.
Generally, midterm elections are about the base, so I'm not sure I quite understand that. Perhaps they're looking at it and saying, listen, for us to win the majority, we've got to win some districts Trump won. And to do that, we can't be talking about impeaching him. So I don't, it looks to me like they're trying to have it both ways a little bit. But they can't really argue against the economy. We're down to 3.9% unemployment, something we haven't seen in decades. Consumer confidence is at a tremendous high. Fewer people receiving food stamps than we've had in 20 or 30 years. Significant capital investment in the first quarter. I think I saw it was up 39% in the first quarter of this year, capital investment. So lots of good news out there on the economy, and that does create problems for Democrats. So the question is going to be, what argument are they going to make? My guess is they're going to make a class warfare argument over tax cuts. They're going to probably run on health care, make the argument that Republicans would try to undo Obamacare if they have power over the next 2 years. And then probably talks to some extent about Trump's temperament. But I don't know. I don't know that that's enough. We'll see.
Speaking of Trump's temperament, and Rudy Giuliani is now on Team Trump. Is Rudy helping or hurting the president's case right now on TV?
The hard thing in talking about this story is very few people know all the facts, right? And I'm not one of them, and you're not one of them. And we know what we read, and we have a certain level of intelligence we can bring to this and analyze this, but we don't know all the facts. And in legal matters, it's always risky to sort of opine about that. That said, it seems to me Rudy is creating more problems than he's solving. I hate to say that, because I think a lot of Rudy Giuliani, if you've ever read his book Leadership about his time as mayor, it's an incredible book, very much worth reading. I don't really understand what he's trying to do. I don't know why he's going on television right now. He doesn't even really know everything about Trump's case. He said yesterday he's about 50% educated on all the facts of the case. The idea that a lawyer would go on television for a high-profile client only knowing 50% of the facts is ridiculous. And look, I don't think it's also helpful that he and Trump appear to be, differing to some extent on some of the language that Rudy's used. That's not helpful either. They have got to get on the same page figure out what their strategy is and be disciplined going forward, because there is some risk here to the president. I don't necessarily think the Stormy Daniels thing presents much legal risk to the president. I could be wrong about that. I generally take Rudy Giuliani's view that the risk to him on that question is not that significant. But, we'll see. I mean, if they're able to depose President Trump, which is, I think, an open question, that could create problems. Obviously, it's been, somewhat embarrassing. I'm sure it's not been helpful to his marriage. But, we'll see where it goes. I don't really understand what Giuliani's doing. He is a smart guy. He's had a lot of experience. This Cohen matter is in front of the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. I mean, Giuliani was formerly the U.S. Attorney in that office, right? Yeah. He was an assistant attorney general in the Reagan years. I mean, he has been around the block and done a lot of things. Whether we're seeing his best thinking and all of his experience being brought to bear and best strategy, I'm not sure that we're seeing it right now.
Visiting with Matt Mackowiak, Republican strategist. Matt, tell folks how they can sign up for your newsletter and what your next podcast is over as well.
Yeah, 3,000 Texans receive our morning email, which we take all the news from around the state, put it in one email, and send it to you every morning, every weekday morning. It's called Must Read Texas. You can sign up for a free one-week trial at mustreadtexas.com. Podcast is called Mac on Politics with the Washington Times. I think we're at 115 five-star reviews in the iTunes store. We've got, I think, 81 episodes now. Most recent episode is with Amy Chozick of the New York Times, who has a best-selling book. She just spent 10 years, basically, following Hillary Clinton around, and she writes about the presidential campaign in a book that's really a fun read. It's a great conversation. You can find the podcast in the iTunes store, on Google Play, on Stitcher, and on the web at maconpoliticspodcast.com.
All right, Matt, thank you as always. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Chad. Have a great week.
You too. That's Matt Mackowiak.